The video. Let's see. Jordan's and he's actually one of the people who started.
Although I don't recognize any faces. It's nice to be back. I started the Portland PowerShell user group, I think in around 2011, late 2011, early 2012. And it's great to see the growth that you guys have had, the infusion of streaming and sponsorships. It took us a long time to get at least 4 people in a room. So you guys are doing doubly better than we did initially. So it's great to see. Anyway, thank you for having me. As Bill said, my name is Jordan Smith. I am a cloud solution architect for Microsoft. I'm based here locally in Portland. My area of focus is working with customers that already have a large investment in Azure and helping them develop new solutions, helping them frame governance and control, security, access control, monitoring, management, operations, infrastructure as a service, automation, you name it. So I focus on the apps and infra side of Azure. Azure is very big. If anybody wants to come up to me afterwards and they have an Azure specific question, not necessarily a PowerShell specific question, I'll be happy to have a chat. Like I said, it's a very big platform. There's a lot of stuff kind of going on under the hood, so it seems to kind of drum up a lot of conversation when it comes up. But today we're going to be talking about an Azure service for PowerShell. So we're going to be talking about Azure automation. And I don't have any slides because I hate PowerPoint. I am a tech-heavy guy, so I'll try not to lose you just talking and giving you demos and showing code. I typically, as soon as I see a PowerPoint slide, I zone out. So I'm going to try to engage you as much as I can with demos, a trip through kind of the service and what it can do, and then we'll open it up for questions or whatever afterwards, if that sounds good. So we'll just kind of talk about the journey of kind of where we're going with Azure, specifically around PowerShell. I mean, we all know kind of within an organization how we manage remote scripting today. You typically have a server or set of servers somewhere sitting on premises. They have access to your script repository, or they even maybe are hosted locally on that server. We typically run a bunch of scheduled tasks or something to go and execute some code against some remote machines. That usually requires a PS session, right? So we can execute that code. But the challenge with that is, we still have to manage the resources, right? Those VMs need patching and maintenance and updates, and they cost money to run somewhere, right? I mean, even if it's amortized in a large spend of data center compute, it's still somebody's still paying the bill for those cycles to be ticking, right? And then some of the operations, they get bogged down in what I would call the PowerShell-ness of PowerShell, right? The constructs of just PowerShell, right? But when we bring PowerShell out into Azure, we offer it as a cloud service, right? So that means that you can interface with it in a way you can interface with a lot of cloud services, right? You don't necessarily need PowerShell remoting to execute a script, right? Maybe we can tie in with software processes. Maybe we can use REST APIs to trigger runbooks. Maybe we can build our output streams into a central collection point and then take action on things when maybe our scripts aren't working, right? Especially if you've done a lot of automation and that automation's been handed off. Something can change in the environment, right? And you don't know that something's failing in your automation typically until someone says something, right? It's usually a layer 8 level monitoring, right? It's like, oh, that didn't work, or oh, none of these machines got updated in the last month, right? What happened? So I think the idea around Azure Automation is to bring the service, take away sort of the infrastructure requirements, and offer up just a service that you can kind of plug into to run your scripts, to build your automation pipelines, to be the heavy lifter for you in the automation environment, and then tie into other software processes when things go wrong or they need to change, or maybe we need to take an extra step, right? When something goes wrong, we can alert on it, maybe kick into another runbook or something like that, right? So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of the service, kind of what it does from a high level, and then we'll dig into some demos. I've got a little bit of demo code. I wasn't able to do a whole lot today, and some of it's not working, which is good because you can actually see when things go wrong, how we handle it, right? So this is kind of the overview. You can see over here, this is the Azure portal. You can see over here that on the left here, I'm filtering out by automation accounts. So I have several automation accounts. The great thing about this cloud service is it's not one-to-one, right? If I build an automation account, it's not like my team's the only one that can use it, right? Or that I can only have one automation account. I can have 100 automation accounts. I can have 10,000 automation accounts. I can have one automation account per person. I can have one per team. I can have one per organization. It really depends on how the teams want to collaborate in an automation environment, right? Which is the other thing I think is missing from sort of the on-premises world is unless we're doing it really code-based out of a repository, some of the collaboration gets lost, right? Because I've got this script running over on this server, you've got that script running over on that server. We don't really know who's talking to what or who's running what. So there's a lot of chaos in the environments, right? So the idea is to kind of bring these things together under a single framework in the Azure plane, and allow us to kind of use the service as in sort of a distributed model, right? So when you provision an automation account, it's going to ask you. goes to Azure Automation Service, checks itself in, tells itself I need this node configuration, and downloads that node configuration. In the demo today, what we're actually doing is trying to create a hybrid worker. So we're using DSC to get a node to become a DSC hybrid worker. So it's a little bit of chicken and egg. It's not working, so I'm going to caveat with that. And it's due to I have an old product ID for the agent. And I couldn't find the new one in time for the demo. So we'll see things fail, but that's good because we'll see how we deal with it too. So yeah. So we'll once I start provisioning stuff, we'll go through there. But I'm going to start taking you through the demo now. But one thing that I wanted to point out before I do is how I'm going to be launching the demo. So in our runbooks, I have this runbook that I've built. It's called Deploy Stuff. And struggling to come up with naming things, and I threw this together in about an hour today. So I'm just going to be doing my best. The cool thing about the runbook capability is that I have the ability to create a webhook on the front of a runbook, and that turns it instantly into a software-based process, which is amazing for me because I often have to think about ways to tie in automation in weird places, right? In weird scenarios, in weird software-based processes, and so I've started using things like Logic App, which is a REST-based transformative service in Azure. So you can take something from somewhere using a REST call, maybe do some transformation on some of the data, and then do another REST call somewhere else, right? So that ties into business process very well, which can tie in on the back end to IT process, which is automation, right? So thinking about kind of like ecosystem pipeline deliveries and how things get deployed in modern software development, a lot of things are being done using APIs. And so we wanted to offer a way to also trigger that process via a software-based call. So to that effect, I have a runbook sitting on this runbook called Deploy Stuff. I'll show you the code on the runbook in a minute, but I wrote a small script just in Bash, right, to go and hit that webhook. And what I'm basically doing is you see in the data block, I'm defining a bunch of parameters, right? These are parameters that are probably very common to deployment scenarios, right? So I have a VNet name because I'm going to be deploying a virtual network. I have a region, so I want this to exist in West US2. The VM prefix is what I use in my templates to deploy multiple VMs of the same type. So I have a template that I'm going to be calling from PowerShell that runs through and loops through the number of instances that we're passing through. So I have a prefix of that. So the first VM will be demo VM 00, and then the next one will be 01 because every software-based processes love 0 first. And then the number of instances that I'm going to be deploying are 2. And then I'm passing off a node configuration for desired state configuration. And so this node configuration is going to be passed into my Azure Resource Manager template, which is then going to provision the DSC extension and then configure the DSC agent to connect to the service and get config. Okay, so we'll go through that. It's a little bit high level at the moment, I understand. But let's see. I'll bring this up in line here so that you guys can see it. So I can view, oops, I didn't want to start that. I want to view it. So this is the published source. We have the concept of publishing in Azure Automation. So we can have a runbook in sort of an edit state and then when it's ready to be actually executed, it's in a published state. So if you go in here and you hit edit, it'll put it in edit mode, and then it will not be available to be executed until it's published again. It's just how we manage the publishing. If you do hook up a Git repository or a source code repository, just realize that the first time that you go and do the synchronization, all of your runbooks will be in edit. You need to go and publish them before they're actionable. that will get people stuck quite a bit. So in my code, you can see I have one parameter object, and that's my webhook data. So I just created an object called webhook data, and then I go into an if statement, and I want to make sure that the webhook data has actually got data in it. So I want to make sure it's not null. And then I create a params object by converting the request body data into, or from JSON. And then from that, I use the request body to build, using nested properties, a bunch of other variables. So you can see I'm saying my VNet name to params.vnet name, params.region, params.vnet prefix, and I can bring up the other things so you can see how it matches up, right? This is the parameterization of this. Does this all make sense? Any questions here? Okay, cool. So as we get into the script, I just want to make sure that, like I said, things aren't null. Here's where I build my Azure run as statement. So this is my connection using the service principal account. You can see there's no password involved. I'm literally just using the service to get the credential object, which is a certificate, and then saying, okay, use that certificate to connect to Azure. Azure Automation is the only one that has that service. So it's the only one that knows about what the credential is, right? So run as accounts don't work cross automation accounts. A run as account is specific to an automation account, right? That's basically the service, how it authenticates. Right? So I'm doing some catching here on errors. See if this scrolling works. Used to my other machine, come on. Okay, and then we set some global variables. And so the interesting thing that I wanted to bring up here is I'm calling some of these credentials out of Azure Key Vault. Azure Key Vault is an HSM-backed security store that I can interact with software-based processes, right? So it has an access policy. I've given my run as account access to read keys, read secrets. So it can go onto my Key Vault and it can check out the secret, for example, the DSC registration key that I have in there. I also storing my virtual machine admin password in there. Every virtual machine has to have, at least a Windows one, has to have an admin password when it's deployed. That is a sticking point for a lot of people in automation, right? When we're deploying things in Azure, we got to have a local account to log into it first, right? If we're going to interactively log onto it, we've got to have an account to do so, right? So when the VM gets provisioned, it's going to ask for an admin password. We don't want to pass that in plain text, right? We don't want to be prompted, the command prompt to type password when we're doing a deployment, especially in a software-based process. We want to have a value. We want to have it stored. We want to have it stored securely. And we want to bring it up when we need it. We want to call it as is, right? And so that is the code that you could use to gather data out of your Key Vault. Like I said, this will be in the repository, so you're welcome to check this out, share it. Most of my secrets, things like my Key Vault name and stuff like that, those are stored as variables in my automation account. So I'm happy. Again, see, it's collaborative. I'm happy to share that stuff with you because you're not getting into my secrets. So yeah, again, I'm casting some more variables. Timestamp is important because for some reason, the DSC agent requires some kind of timestamp value when being deployed. And this is something that carries back from an on-prem day. So it's just something that we haven't, I think, worked out the kinks for in Azure yet. And then so I'm doing another check here to make sure that, my account has access to the Key Vault. If it doesn't, I'm going to go ahead and throw an error here. And then I'm building a resource group. And if that fails, I catch an error. And then here's where I build a param block. Well, for my VNet, I don't have a lot of params. It's already pretty much defined how I want it to be. A lot of this automation stuff is really defining where upstream do we want to capture the variable, right? Do we want to capture as an incoming parameter, or do we want to declare it as a variable somewhere that we can call at some time, right? So, and sometimes some things are hard coded. Like, you know, in my templates and some templates, there's things I don't want to redo or reparameterize every time. So, you know, a pretty standard VNet is, you know, I set up a /8 or /16, and then I carved out 2 subnets. It's nothing too crazy, but those are parameters I don't feel like passing in today. So I just hard code them in the template. You'll see them in the template when I bring it up. But instead of building the VNet in PowerShell, which I could have done, I like calling Azure Resource Manager templates just because they're declarative. They're not iterative. So you know, I can call it the same way every time. If I misplace, you know, something in the script, it's sometimes harder for me to troubleshoot. So I'm just calling new -Azure RM resource group deployment, which is basically the commandlet for instituting an ARM deployment using Azure Resource Manager. And here I'm building a params hash for the VM. All right, so in the demo today, I'm going to deploy a VM, and then I'm going to deploy a VNet, and then or a couple VMs. And I'm going to try to make those VMs hybrid workers using DSC. It doesn't work, like I said, but we'll try. But here's how I'm building out the parameters block that I'm sending into the template. And it'll make sense when I bring up the template. But the parameters is just a hash table, right? So some of these things I'm going to bring in from, you know, like the variable store. Some of these things I'm bringing in from Key Vault. Some of these things I'm building them on the fly. Some things I'm declaring inline, like subnet 1. I don't, you know, it just depends on you how you want to call your variables, right? So, and then again, I'm calling the same commandlet for a VM deployment. Not rocket science, pretty simple. Like I said, I built this in about 2 hours. So that's kind of what I don't like spending hours scripting anymore. I used to, but I think I hit my head against the wall too many times. I really like things that are just, you know, I can write them out once, be done with it. So just for a frame of reference, I'm going to go ahead and bring up the template that I'm using. So here's the VNet that I'm using, just to kind of so you can see. So the parameters that I'm taking in, remember the only parameter that I was taking in is VNet name. So this directly correlates to a parameter within the Azure Resource Manager template. Right? Same name, same parameter. I'm passing it in. The rest of these I've declared using what's called default value. So default value is in an ARM template, when I don't declare a value, it's just going to use the default. Right? I could still declare one, so I could still pipe in a parameter for VNet address prefix if I want to, but I don't have to because again, the /16 is pretty standard, pretty typical. The other thing that I'm doing that's kind of interesting is I'm building a network security group. So if I wanted to access this VM, the port 3389 is going to be open. So I'm doing that within the template. Right? So I'm just declaring that here. Again, I could add this to automation if I wanted to. I could parameterize these values here. So say protocol, source range, destination port. I can parameterize all of those, right? And I could put that in the params hash for the VM block if I want to. It's up to me. And then again, just building a network. Pretty simple. This is the VM. Same concept. There's more values that are undeclared as default values. So I'm bringing them in as parameterized values from the script. But this is the declaration of a VM, right? So this is a lot of code that I would have to write in PowerShell. I already have these templates. I've built these over the years. So these are just reusable artifacts for me, that's how I like it. I can just call this template over and over and over and over again and deploy it. So I'm going to just quickly kick this off as a webhook. So I've got bash running here, and I'm just going to sh vm curl sh, and that's weird. Illegal characters. Anyway. Yeah, that shouldn't be the case. Well, let's see if the job ran. Let's see what happened. So we can go and look as to whether or not the job ran by going back to the automation account. and looking at the jobs blade. If I can find it, all right, here. And jobs are going to show anything that's running, executing, completed, and that did not fire. Interesting. That didn't come up in my test. Let's try this. Let's build it inline, just quickly. So we'll take the data block, and we'll cast that as a variable. It's for people that really love bash scripting, right? Okay. And then we have a URL. This is why we do PowerShell, right? And we'll call curl. And if it works, I should get a job ID back from the service. This is all running on my mobile hotspot, by the way. So, okay, so we got a job ID back, which means that worked. So now if I go back to the portal and I click jobs again, well, I'll click out of jobs and then back into jobs because somebody didn't create a refresh button yet for some reason. We see that my job is now queued, which is kind of cool. The fact that I can launch this out of a process. I was doing demos a while back where I had connected Logic apps to my Twitter feed, and I was tweeting Azure, and then I would hit tweet, and Logic apps would pick it up, and it would hit this webhook for a runbook that I had set up, and it was going and stepping into a PowerShell workflow, which is now deprecated, so I won't take you there. And it was building a 3-tier application with web, app, and database, and using Chocolatey and all kinds of other fun stuff. That was a little bit heavier than what I wanted to do today, and plus I had to go and put it back together. It's about a year old, so not as cool for the demo today, but still kind of cool that you can integrate with this stuff. So if we take a look, we can check on output, right? So it's running right now. It's deploying stuff. We can see the general, this is standard output, right? So this could be piped to a text file. It could be piped to a log. We can hook up the telemetry to log analytics, and we can go and query and see if things failed or what broke or whatever. But this is just, you know, this is what you would see on the console if you ran it, right? Is the output. And hopefully we don't have any errors, but I can check for errors here. I'm writing exceptions in the code. I suppose it would help to bring up the runbook for this, huh? Did I do that already? Yes, I did. Okay. So as it's running, we can take a look at how the desired state configuration is getting deployed, if you guys are interested in that. So for desired state configuration, and if you haven't worked with DSC very much, you may not be aware of this, but in order to deploy DSC configurations, I have to write a configuration, right? I have to write a configuration, I have to submit it to the service, and then I have to ask the service to compile it. So this is my configuration. It's called hybrid worker node. It's because I'm trying to define that. And let's see if we can bring that up. Maybe I'll just bring it up in code here. Yeah. So here's the DSC config. And this was pulled off of the PowerShell gallery. And I changed it up a little bit. This kind of tells you what the description is, how to use it. So I have my config block. It's called hybrid runbook worker. And the reason you're seeing squigglies there is because I don't have that module deployed on this machine. But I don't need it deployed on this machine. I only need it deployed in Azure Automation. We're calling these two modules, XPS desired state configuration. X denotes that it's experimental. And then I'm importing the DSC resource of hybrid runbook worker DSC, which is a community resource that's been maintained by Microsoft. I am attempting to get some secrets from Key Vault for like OMS workspace ID and workspace key so that I can onboard the system into a VM. That particular piece I haven't gotten working yet. So the running config is a little bit different than this. You have to do some tricky stuff if you want to have a DSC compiled config use a different credential to go reach out and do stuff. And I can't use a run as credential to do that. I have to use an actual built credential. I don't have a built credential because everything on my side is MFA'd. So I would have to go request a credential, give it access to my Key Vault, and that's a very long process in Microsoft. So I have to have someone sponsor that. Wow. Do we have power here? I'm gonna need to plug in real quick. My bag was around here somewhere. Sorry, guys. Just give time for my automation to run anyway. The mic batteries. Okay. Well, we'll get through this pretty quick, I think. Okay. Cool. All right. So what this is attempting to do is download a Microsoft management package. It's called the Oms Agent or Microsoft Management Agent. It's the agent that controls the hybrid worker capability. And also adds things like the change control tracking and the inventory management solution and the update management solution, all that stuff from OMS. It adds all that. And then it'll also register it as a node, so it's being monitored. It's sending data to log analytics, and I can go and do, perf queries and all that kind of stuff. It's beyond this talk, but then I'm calling a package, the package module. This is going to be the problem today, but we'll see it in the logs when we dive into it. This product ID is wrong. So if you're pulling this out of the gallery, just be aware of that. The product ID for the monitoring agent is bad. And so we'll have to go find that and change that. And so I'm telling it to start a service. And then this is part of the module for the hybrid worker registration. So these are sort of endemic to the module itself. So I won't kind of bore you with those. But this is how the basic config is done. And then in order to compile it, I have to also send a command to Azure Automation to tell it, hey, you have this config. I uploaded this config. This is the config name. Please compile it with these values, right? Because compilation has to happen for PowerShell DSC to work, and it compiles values into the solution so that it can provide those to the moth when it's generated. So this is pretty simple. It's literally just passing in my automation account and the automation accounts resource group that it exists in. And then I'm calling a node config called localhost, where I say that we allow plain text password, and that's in case we want to embed credentials, right? On premises is not a good idea to compile plain text password. In Azure Automation, we obfuscate all of that away and encrypt it for you. So we take those password values, and while they're stored in plain text in the moth, that moth is stored on an encrypted volume on an encrypted server in a run space that only you have access to. All right, so it's not as much of an issue for this. No, but we do have some articles around securing that credential if you want to. And then it just starts the compilation, right? So the cool thing is like, say I have a configuration that changes a lot, or I need to change the configuration. I could set up a block of parameters just like I did with the other runbook. I could create a parameter block that's based on webhook data, and then I could set up a webhook to recompile my DSC, which is something that's pretty cool. Like I was doing a lot of labs where I was deploying a domain over and over again, and so I was doing it with DSC, deploying every single time? Well, I just wanted to change the domain name every time, right? So I just created a parameter for the domain name, and then I just reran a compilation over and over again. So I had an unlimited number of domains I could run just recompiling DSC config.
In our case, we just, it's just part of our CI pipeline. So just whenever a commit happens or something changes in CI, it just
it starts the compilation job. Yeah. Yep. But if you wanted to, if your pipeline was not able to run PowerShell to do that, then exactly, you could call the webhook or call the runbook directly. Or use the CLI to call the runbook. I mean, there's a million ways to do anything nowadays. So let's check in on our job. Let's see what it's doing. Let's see if it's failed or running or succeeded. Still running, it looks like. Check our output. That's still going. But we can also look for our resources now. Let's see what it's building. So I'm going to have way too many resources here, so I'm going to trim these down a little bit. This is what happens when you get invited to everyone's subscriptions. You're going to do a lot of portal filtering. So it looks like I created my VNet, because this wasn't here before. So we can look at the resources, make sure they're right. Oh, looks like I have 2 resources here. I have my VNet and my rule, which is all I declared in that template. So that looks good. So we'll go back here, and it looks like we have some VM stuff getting provisioned. Let's see if the VMs are up and running. Yeah, it looks like they're running. We have demo VM 00 and demo VM 01. Got some managed disks and some NICs. All looks pretty happy. I didn't mean to go to resource cost. So I'll check back in now and see if we've got some progress on our DSC configuration, because I think that's probably what it's waiting for. Is it's now provisioned the VMs and it's waiting for its DSC configuration to go ahead and say that it's done, it's completed without errors. Check that job again real quick. Still running. So I'm going to go into DSC nodes, see if I have anything showing up there yet. They should be registered with the service already. Yeah, it looks like I do. And it looks like they're in progress. So they're provisioning right now. They're trying to deploy the config that I defined. Yeah. I thought this would go a little quicker. The deployment. Yeah, cool. I mean, we can check back in. The one thing I did want to show is the compliance management. I'm sure you're aware of it, but when the node is showing up here, we can drive into it, and if we see that something's not compliant, we can actually drill into why it's not compliant, right? So here we can see it failed, and I think this is probably a previous report, but we can dive in. Look at the report details. It doesn't show any resources yet. Here we go. Yeah. So we see that remote file configuration block is compliant, but the package failed. Why did the package fail? Let's take a look. Okay, it's the operational insights agent that I'm trying to deploy. Why did it fail? 43 seconds, source info. Oh, look, product ID is invalid, right? So that's how I was able to tell. Normally, it's a black box. I got to go on the system. I got to go get local configuration manager, right, and figure out why my config's not applying. With Desire State configuration in the cloud, it's right there, right? It's part of the telemetry. It's part of the service. So I think that's all I got. I appreciate you guys having me here. Let me show you the service. Happy to take conversations offline if you want to chat about it, or just have some nerdy conversations about Azure in general or PowerShell in general. But thanks for having me. Appreciate it. Thanks.
All right, so once again, I want to thank George now for the And for everybody that,